So when it was released, Metal Gear Solid Delta looked great, but seemed to have some somewhat awkward performance issues. But a new patch has arrived, which seemingly says that we're going to be seeing some improvements, specifically on PlayStation 5 Professional. And of course, there's some enhancements made elsewhere on the PC version too. We're going to talk about all of that. But Tom, do you want to kick off by talking about what patch 1.21 does for the console, specifically what has been promised and what has been delivered?
Right, so the promise was to address the PS5 Pro issues. I think it's performance mainly, and adding a new graphics toggle, which Konami has delivered on. It really is like one of the biggest sticking points of the game at launch when it arrived in August. It was just the headline really was PS5 Pro performing worse than the base PS5.
Right, okay.
And you know, it's a terrible position to be in, having spent that much on that hardware. And there was just one mode, default mode, which ran with PSSR. So this patch, delivered by Konami or Virtuous, depending on who handled it, goes some way to fix some of those problems. And I'm happy to report it is a positive outcome overall. And there's some residual benefits for base PS5, which I'll touch on in a moment. So I guess to get to the point, it is, well, I put together a three-way kind of comparison with 1.11, 1.1.1 on the older default mode on Pro, and then you've got on the middle end right here the 1.2.1 and 1.2.1 performance and quality modes, the new one being the performance mode. So in a nutshell, the quality mode is pretty much a match in settings and resolution for what we had previously. The performance mode is the new thing. It's the one that kind of adjusts the settings to try and squeeze a bit more, even more performance back. But as you can probably see, it's an improvement even on the quality mode. And it seems like some optimizations have been taken under the hood. It seems like there's just an improvement by about 4, 5, 6 FPS on average across the board here. Doing these runs across the swamp areas, the earlier Virtuous mission of the game. And so as far as non-combat scenarios go, no AI interactions, just walking forward across these areas in a matched like-for-like manner, it's looking really good. I think we've got something to say, John and I, about what happens later when you actually engage. But it's a good outlook. The performance mode is better than the old patch by about 10 FPS. So it's a huge boost, and it gets us to that 60 FPS line through a lot of these areas pretty much without fault, and even goes up to about plus 15 FPS at some points during there's a really good stress test where you walk straight down this swamp area, completely flooded, and there's lumen reflections everywhere, sentries flying overhead. You get a plus 15 FPS boost in that case. So it's a really good turnout. Before, I think we said, all right, you'll need a VR display to really, create perceptually smooth motion from the frames being delivered by this game on PS5 Pro. Now you're getting to the point where, while walking anywhere, you're not going to so much need that as a crutch. I suppose visual settings side, it's worth noting that there is still PSSR engaged on both modes. They haven't dropped it, which means you get the same pros and cons we pointed out in our original review. So in static moments, you're going to have a slightly less clear image than the TAAU method used on the base PS5. But in motion, PSSR resolves all these details, like foliage, the swaying grass, everything with more clarity. So yeah, I think overall I'd take that. I think that's a good turnout for PS5 Pro as well in terms of image clarity.
Right.
And yeah, the only last thing to mention is in terms of how they've achieved this performance boost on the performance mode is they have dropped the ambient occlusion setting, so there will be less abundant shading underneath tall grass. I think it's best noticed if you switch the entire screen between quality and performance modes on Pro. And the other thing is the Lumen GI setting. Yeah, there's less balanced lighting as a result across Snake's back and geometry across the scene and small grass, which means that those areas are less. They're kind of less. There's less brightness to them because there's no balanced lighting to them from other objects. So it's you'll notice like there's some areas that appear darker, some areas appear lighter, but overall it's a less sort of vibrant image on performance mode. But yes, that's kind of how the three ways stack up. But it's definitely not the entire story. There's issues elsewhere,
such as.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I can get.
Did you want to get into it, John? Yeah, I've been talking for a while.
So the main issue here is that it's still not stable. There is a very easy fix for them to do, which I'll say in a moment here. But essentially, as soon as AI activates, the performance impact becomes known. And this clearly seems to be a CPU limitation. So let's say you're sneaking around in a base area, there's enemies all over the place, you're stealth taking them down. It's no problem. It actually does mostly hold 60 FPS. But as soon as you're caught and the enemies become alert, they begin to walk around the level searching for you, trying to engage the player. Instantly, the frame rate just tanks. It's down into the 40s again. It's not good. And frankly, I think that's not good enough. And it's especially baffling given that the actual game logic and AI and behavior is all directly derived from the PlayStation 2 version. So, yeah. I mean, it was pretty awesome for PS2 era, and it still holds up well. It's just, however they're doing this in the background, it's too heavy for this game on this console. So that's not great. So the solution, as I see it, is one that I'm surprised they just haven't embraced. The 120 hertz output mode on PS5. This wouldn't fix it for everyone, but engaging that, doing VRR properly, which should not be a difficult thing. If they do this, anybody with a VR-capable TV will have a much more fluid experience. Because as it is right now, it still drops out of the 60 hertz VRR window, which is below 48. So you're constantly getting this ping-pong effect between fluid visuals and a sort of stuttery, juddery look. And that sucks. So that's still not very good. So again, if the Konami developers happen to listen to this, that's what you do. You use a 120 hertz output mode, optionally even. Maybe when you enable performance mode or something, it triggers, but it should be there all the time. Even on base system, that will solve this issue. Secondly, I still think they should offer a 30 FPS cap if people are okay with 30 FPS, because you could get consistency. And they do that on the base PS5, but you don't get it here. But on base PS5, the frame rate cap was broken. It had poor frame pacing. So it would be nice to have that implemented, but not be broken. But it's nice to want things. You just can't always get them. So that's kind of the state of it right now, where I do think it's a lot better. It's far more playable now. And it's almost a game now where it encourages Snake to be as stealthy as possible in order to keep the frame rate high.
That's not right optimal, though. That's not an optimal outcome, is it?
No, it's not optimal at all. And also the cutscenes still run uncapped. And they're often not 60.
Right.
So the whole thing just feels kind of not great to me, and I still have issues with like jiving with what they're trying to do here, where you've got this fresh coat of paint that looks very modern, but it animates, plays, and behaves like the PS2 game. And I think they could have done a much better job overall with like upping the way things work. I mean, it does have the crouch walking and third person shooting from the 3DS game, but it's a weird one. It feels strange. I never got on with it that well. But Tom, I don't think you've had a chance to play with this much, but I actually have the game on PC as well.
Yes.
And they finally added an official 21:9 mode. And it does work, but I have to say, I think it's inferior to the fan-made 21:9 mode. And the reason is simple. The fan patch allows you to view the cutscenes in 21:9. This one does not. So menus, cutscenes are all limited to 16:9, and then gameplay is ultra wide. I know why they did this. because the original vision, the original scenes are designed to be 16 by 9. They can't account for things that happen outside that range. And it's true, there are very select sequences I've seen where, yeah, the 21 by 9 view of the cutscene can reveal something that looks weird. But frankly, I think it should be an option. We've seen this in games before. I think Dragon Age the Veilguard had this, where you could toggle a 21 by 9 or ultra wide cutscene option. It warned you that, hey, you might see some weirdness, but you could do it. I think that should have been the case here.
Right.
But still, it's nice to have official 21 by 9 gameplay. The bigger issue, though, is that the frame rate still seems to be capped, and there are ways to uncap it, but it causes bugs in the gameplay that break it. So instead, the best way to play it on PC is, in my opinion, to use NVIDIA Smooth Motion. You know what I mean?
Yep. The driver level frame generation solution.
It's not bad. It actually does feel convincing enough, and it looks better than just running at 60 hertz. So I actually did play through the game that way initially. So PC with the smooth motion with the ultra wide patch. So if you just buy this game on Steam and load it up, you're going to have a better experience now than you did at launch, but it's still not as good as it could be. And there is no version of this game that I would say is technically faultless.
Right.
Which is a bummer.
It is a shame.
Tom, you also decided to go back and look at the base PlayStation 5, although I understand that the notes don't actually specify any improvements for the base PlayStation 5. But
I should mention a few quick points on PS5 Pro as well before we get to that. Obviously, the cutscenes on that, they're exactly the same as they were in terms of performance. So you're literally unlocked to 60 and the reading is exactly as it was on quality and performance mode. So yeah, it makes, there's literally no settings change there. And so it's only in gameplay that any of these changes happen. And yeah, as John mentioned, obviously the Pro still drops massively to, mid-30s at points I've had during this one Razvet fight with loads of enemies, and there's exploding barrels. And I noticed on the performance mode, it drops to a low of 720p, which is like a new lower DRS bounds there, as opposed to 756p on the quality mode, which was how it was before on the default mode before the patch. So, and they've fixed a few things as well. Like on the plus side, they've fixed the awkward lumen GI flickering across the floors of some interiors. Like there's a sort of lab area later on. That seems to be fixed on Pro. But annoyingly, on base PS5, it's still there. And anytime you move the camera, you just get this odd shimmer across the floor, which just doesn't look right. And yeah, 30 FPS cap, unevenly frame paced, which is just no good, really, on the base PS5. So, but yeah, base PS5 on the performance mode, that is improved by about 3 frames per second. It is genuinely like better across the board, but it's also not really as substantial as PS5 Pro. It's still, quite a meager improvement, but it is there. So, yeah, something to celebrate.
Oliver, what do you reckon about all of this?
I don't know. I mean, it's good that they're improving things, but it just seems so kind of fundamentally a little bit miserable, to be honest, how a 21-year-old game, like, I don't know, Bluepoint did a great job with it, I thought, back in the day, back in like 2009, 2010, just getting it running at 60 FPS on 7th gen consoles, and that version runs a heck of a lot better than this version on much more powerful 9th generation console hardware, including the PS5 Pro, the vaunted PS5 Pro. I also don't think it's that amazing looking for a UE5 game, like relative to other UE5 titles we've seen recently. I think there are some better looking ones. Obviously, a lot of that comes down to the animation. I also think the lighting in some areas is a little bit flat looking for a UE5 title relative to some of their games. The fact that it's this heavy for a game that looks like this, that's a remake that really should be like the apex of the form for a game like this. It's a remake, putting a ton of time into it, putting a ton of money into it. Couldn't it have been better? Couldn't they have made better decisions during development? I'm not even saying UE5 is the problem here, because clearly there are performant and good-looking UE5 games in the consoles. There are 60 FPS UE5 games in the consoles that look good, look better than this even. So I just think it's kind of a problematic project. I'd also say similar things probably about the Oblivion remaster earlier this year. The
Cough, virtuous. Cough.
yes, I was about to say virtuous is a common element. I'm not sure exactly who to maybe put a little bit of blame on here there, but certainly virtuous is a common element there. And again, in that case, I think John, you had the exact same recommendation, which is like run this at a lower frame rate, use frame gen, kind of cope with it, and maybe that's an okay experience. That game had maybe more profound issues than Metal Gear Solid in terms of its kind of cell loading behavior. Yeah. That was pretty nasty. But it's still a kind of similar situation where you have a game that is an older game, 19 years old, 20, 21 years old, these older titles that people have a lot of nostalgia for. I certainly have a lot of nostalgia for both those games, but you're releasing them in 2025 and they run worse in some respects than they ran back then. I just kind of think that's not a good situation to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually just going back, taking a look at some legacy clips of the Bluepoint port to Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Unfortunately, we don't have combat footage there, but it is slightly disappointing that, at best it's, well, I don't think Metal Gear 3 ever went down to 35 frames per second on the Xbox 360 during combat.
No.
Yeah, I'm just curious what is actually the cause there. I mean, where do you point the finger there? Unreal Engine 5 CPU overhead on top of the original game code overhead? Even then, it seems implausible. What do you reckon, John?
I think it probably is just however they've built this system to allow the original game code to run on top of or beneath Unreal Engine.
Right.
They're essentially taking a page from what Bluepoint always does, right? But clearly they're just not able to do it at the same level. Like, obviously this stuff, you can't always just power your way through a problem. And I would say somewhere along the line, they're doing things that are simply suboptimal, shall we say. And as a result, we're getting performance like this. And that is a shame. Like, I think by reducing the settings and the resolution, they've essentially solved all of the GPU related issues on PS5 Pro. So everything we're seeing now is due to other issues with the way that they've designed this.
Right. Okay.
And I'm not sure they can easily solve that at this point. It does seem to be kind of a virtuous staple. And there's hints that the Halo campaign Evolved is also a virtuous joint. So it seems like they've become the sort of go-to house. They must have sold themselves well to all these companies saying, hey, we can bring back your old games and run the old code underneath and do this new UE5 shell on top. And at least 3 publishers bought into it. And they do an okay job, but they don't do a good enough job, I would say. This is where Bluepoint typically excelled, but now that they're owned by Sony, obviously, they're not going to tackle these big multi-platform projects anymore like they used to.
Right.
Which is a shame. And there's nobody really to replace them in this area.
Yeah. I guess the sort of regret that I have is that the actual remastering work is generally very good.
Yeah, I'd agree.
It is. But I would honestly argue, I loaded up the original on PS2 running on a CRT, and I think it just still feels better there because like all the graphics and gameplay, it all feels more coherent.
Yeah.
Where this has that weird thing where the graphics just don't match the game.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it feels strange.
This is a problem that Oblivion Remastered has as well, is that disconnect, right? Between the huge stutters between the segmented world and the beautiful visuals. I think they're beautiful anyway. It just doesn't quite match up.
And that is always the trouble. I mean, when you look at something like the Demon Souls remake or Shadow of the Colossus, those games in their original form had better like animation work that felt more natural and still holds up better today. So like even if it's running that original sort of design beneath the surface, it still feels contemporary. This doesn't feel that contemporary, especially if you've played a lot of The Phantom Pain, which is like so dramatically better, which ultimately, Rich, this comes back to those old Fox engine cutscenes that we saw for MGS3 that we never really got. And it's like, all we really wanted was a remake of this using the Fox engine, but taking advantage of what its gameplay systems and everything were offered. Like if they had done a Phantom Pain style gameplay design, but remaking Metal Gear Solid 3, I think that would have been absolutely stellar.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's will now never happen.
So just to be clear, you're referring to the cinematics that are in the pachinko machine in Japan.
Yes, exactly. There's pachinko machine cutscenes that seemingly were rendered with the Fox engine, suggesting that they went through a bunch of work to get all this stuff running in that engine. I mean, that's nowhere near a complete game, but man, we could dream. That would have been cool.
Okay. Well, I think that's all we've got to say about this. I mean, I guess work is ongoing. You'd expect to see further improvements, but when it comes to sort of CPU optimizations, that's going to be very, very tricky.
Do we think
there is?
Do we think it's going to ever be improved or fixed? Is there any optimism there?
Not completely.
Do we need to wait for a PS6? Is the question.
I mean, you wait for the PC. You just play it on PC.
True. You wait for the PC. You wait until you could afford an expensive PC.
Yeah, exactly. Until you can afford an expensive PC. But I wanted to also mention, while we're on Konami, Silent Hill F.
Right.
That has also not been touched. And I've been wanting to play through this. And frankly, the PS5 Pro version is not good enough. And it's driving me nuts. Like, I had to... Like, that's not right. The PSSR implementation is terrible in that game. There's so much noise and destruction to the image that they need to patch in a toggle to disable that or fix the PSSR problem, because right now it's bad on PS5 Pro. And I can't play the game because I don't want to have to go fetch the original PS5 that's downstairs in the living room, bring it up just to play this game, right? It's a hassle. We shouldn't have to do that. And most people aren't going to have both anyway. So come on, Konami, fix this stuff.
Okay, fair enough.